Today's 7th of March 2020, interview with Mr. Paul Dwyer for Canada's Construction Ltd. Good morning, Paul. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview. And I have a few questions I would like to ask you in relation to timber construction. So, should we use more timber construction? So the first question is, do you believe there should be more passive timber frame houses than passive concrete block houses, and why?
In short, yes, I do. I do believe it because timber is a more renewable resource than those constitutional within the concrete industry. Insofar as timber, if it is purchased from a controlled FSC certified forest, well, then you are guaranteed that the resource will be renewed, and therefore it's sustainable. Aggregates, while they have a low carbon footprint used in the construction of concrete materials, they are not an infinite resource. And for that reason, I would recommend renewable timber passive housing over concrete housing. There are other considerations in relation to the use of timber, and one concern that I would have is it is only with 25 years experience that you can get 25 years experience, and I'm not 100% sure that the designers and the detailers and the tradespeople understand the way that timber should be used in a construction project. And that gives me great concern. They don't have the 25 years experience. Previously, dating back through history, when tradespeople served an apprenticeship, they served it on a material for not just 4 or 5 or 6 years, but they had much longer apprenticeships. So they understood completely the different types of timber, where they can be used, how they should be treated to sustain the use and to prevent the product from failing. Concrete has a longer history in terms of building construction. People understand concrete. I'm not 100% sure that they fully understand timber, and that is my concern. But I would definitely, as a renewable resource, recommend FSC approved passive timber frame housing over concrete.
Thanks very much. Second question was, do you think timber is best sustainable material out of construction? But from what you said, it is. Do you think there's any material in construction that has lower carbon footprint than timber? So it does not be concrete, be any material.
Some materials in their own right have a lower carbon footprint, but are not a renewable resource.
Yeah.
For example, fine aggregates, which would be used in the manufacturing of concrete products, they would have an energy carbon footprint of 75 by 10 to the power of 6 gigajoules. Okay, and they would be from river sands and rocks, but they are not a renewable resource.
Yeah.
And they're certainly not infinite. Structural steel would be from iron ore and limestone. That would have 1800 by 10 to the power of 6 gigajoules carbon footprint by comparison with your 75 for fine aggregates. Then you have coarse aggregates, which would have a carbon footprint in energy terms of 70 by 10 to the power of 6 gigajoules. So you can see, on the one hand, you have the carbon footprint employed in the manufacture of steel and concrete products. Burnt clay, fertile soil, that would be used in the manufacture of bricks, for instance. That would have a concrete footprint of 600 by 10 to the power 6 gigajoules. However, some timber products are sourced here in Europe from South America, and they may not be sourced from FSC certified forests, where you're guaranteed that they will be renewed. And that is where I have the problem. That they come and they dump a lot of plywood products, for instance, on the European markets, and those plywood products may not employ FSC approved lumber in their manufacture. They wouldn't have regulations, the same as what we have here in Europe, from EN 300 in the manufacture of wood-based panel products, and therefore you don't know what has gone into them and how renewable that resource will be, having constructed the wood-based panel products in South America, Brazil in particular.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers your question.
Sure, it does. Thanks. Are timber frame buildings easier to maintain over time, and does it need to be replaced?
Timber is a hygroscopic material. That means that it breathes. It takes on moisture. When it takes on moisture, it expands.
Yeah.
When it gives off moisture, it contracts. So therefore, it's moving. And with that, it needs to be breathable. It needs to have air circulation. It needs to have a sufficient amount of air passing through the structure to allow it to breathe and to prevent decay, such as wet rot, dry rot. And those are big problems with timber. And again, I go back to the detailers, the designers, and the tradespeople. If they realize the qualities of the product and how it should be treated, well, therefore, they will certainly need to maintain the ventilation throughout the building to make sure vent holes are not blocked up by birds planting nests on them and blocking the ventilation and circulation. And timber will last once it's given due care, but it certainly needs to be maintained.
Yeah.
And again, 25 years experience, you get 25 years experience. Timber framed construction here in this country would have started with the likes of IGM and Century Homes, the McCaughey brothers up in Monaghan, and they're probably 35 years in existence. And they would be the largest timber frame manufacturers in the country traditionally. So those guys would understand timber. Their designers would understand the maintenance, and their tradespeople would understand the construction and the upkeep of timber. But I'm not sure that the general marketplace fully understands that at this point, as it's only a very young, about 35 years of age industry here in this country.
Yeah.
There are certain rules and regulations that were written by the Irish Standards Authority in the guidance as to how timber frame construction should happen in this country. And for instance, stick-built construction, which would be the form used in America typically, is not allowed here in this country. You would make up your panels in a warehouse and then deliver them to site, get them erected and get them covered as soon as possible. You cannot afford, in this climate in particular, to allow those panels to get wet on site without having a covering on them. And that's the big problem, because it is hygroscopic. You can engineer it all you want in terms of vac treatments, etc., of the timbers, but the ends, the cut ends of the timbers, the ends are like a box of straws, and they contain microfibrils, and they're like non-return valves that suck in water and bring it up through a tree, for instance. Those microfibrils do not allow the water to come back, and the lignin is the structure that carries the water up through the timber. So once it comes in at the ends, it can travel all the way through the timber, and then it needs to dry out. And if you have it sealed on the outside, it can't dry out. By its very structure, it can't dry out. By vac treating it, you are filling up the microfibrils with a preservative. But when you cut the ends of it, the end isn't sealed. Moisture can still get in there.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of considerations with the use of timber in this country.
But if done right.
If done right.
Yeah.
It's bang on if done right.
Yeah.
It'll work fine once it's cared for and treated properly and respected. Timber is a very, very forgiving material. Very forgiving. More so than concrete, or steel. It's very forgiving. It's malleable. It's easy to bend, and it's easy to work with, by comparison with the others. But I would need to be guaranteed that the people involved in the cradle to the grave analysis of the timber framed house have fully understood
Each step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
Yeah, it seems like it actually.
Is it?
Yeah, the last question was, is there a material like steel you think be better, but you kind of like said it in a way in the last question, and how timber, if done correctly in each step and make sure like there's no moisture goes onto it and allows space to breathe, like it is the better one for the long term than the others like steel. So thanks very much for this interview.
There is no problem. You're more than welcome. On the flip side of it, the thing about the concrete form of construction is the thermal mass benefits. As with the storage heater, for instance, you actually heat up the concrete.
And it releases over time.
And then it releases the energy over time.
Yeah.
That is one benefit of the concrete block, the thermal mass. Just to give it due credit,
Yeah.
and to be balanced in looking at it. But certainly timber as a renewable resource is number one. I'd just like to be sure that everybody in the cradle to the grave understand how the product works and give it due respect. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks very much.
No problem.